Close encounters of the fourth kind involved alleged abductions by UFOs, where people claimed to be involuntarily taken on board a UFO, usually for experimental purposes. Close encounters of the fifth kind involve contactees, or those persons who claim to be in personal contact with UFO entities, usually through metaphysical or occult means. Close encounters of the sixth kind include injuries or deaths resulting from a UFO close encounter. One of the greatest waves of UFO sightings in modern history came in 1965, with more than 500 cases reported during the summer months alone. One such case was near Ann Arbor, Michigan, where 50 people and 12 police officers in 3 counties reported having seen objects flashing across the pre-dawn skies. That evening, 87 female students at Hillsdale College near Ann Arbor watched an object flying around and flashing bright lights for a period of about 4 hours. Life magazine said, "Call them what you will, flying saucers, unidentified flying objects, or optical illusions, they are back again and seen by more people than ever before." Last week, the manifestation seemed almost to have reached the proportions of an invasion. In Washington, House Minority Leader Gerald Ford called for a full-blown investigation. Thus, the first congressional hearings on UFOs began as a closed-door session on April 5, 1966. Their conclusion was that a major university be given the job of researching the UFO phenomena. The job was given to the University of Colorado, and Edward Condon, professor of physics, would serve as chairman of the group. After much research, a 1,465-page report was completed by 36 authors at a cost of more than $500,000. The report was summed up under the section titled Conclusions and Recommendations. It states, "Our general conclusion is that nothing has come from the study of UFOs in the past 21 years that has added to scientific knowledge. Careful consideration of the record leads us to conclude that further extensive study of UFOs probably cannot be justified in the expectations that science will be advanced thereby." On April 17, 1966, Sheriff's Deputies Dale Spower and Wilbur Neff had just investigated an accident when they noticed a glowing object about 1,000 feet above the ground in eastern Ohio. They then began pursuit at speeds of nearly 90 miles an hour. The third officer, Wayne Houston, was listening to their radio and joined the chase. 85 miles later, they pulled into a service station for refueling, where they met patrolman Frank Panzanella, who had also been tracking the UFO. The officers all stood together, watching the object hover to the east. At that point, the object shot upward at great speed and disappeared. Project Blue Book was called in to investigate. The official Air Force version was that at least 5 experienced police officers, one of them a veteran air crewman, had conducted an hours-long high-speed chase of the planet Venus. For more than 20 years, from 1948 through 1969, the United States Air Force was in charge of investigating UFO reports. The first study, established in 1948, was called Project Sign. Its conclusions were that UFOs were real and estimated them to be interplanetary craft. The Pentagon rebuked the report, calling it science fiction fantasy. The next report, called Project Grudge, was established in early 1949 and would proceed in secrecy. The critics of this investigation complained that the Air Force wanted to control all research on UFOs and that its mandate seemed to deny or explain away all sightings. Project Grudge did not last long and was officially dissolved in December of 1949. However, there had been many recent UFO sightings in New Mexico, so the Air Force launched a new study known as Project Twinkle. An observation post was set up in New Mexico and was armed with cameras, telescopes, and other optical equipment. They waited and waited And after a year of frustration, the Air Force terminated Project Twinkle. It was not long after this that the government began a new policy of cooperation with the press by issuing regular releases about sightings and investigations. This was followed by a boom year of over 1,500 reports in 1952. The Air Force then established a task force codenamed Project Blue Book, which was to become the most systematic of all studies done by the Air Force. Witnesses received an 8-page questionnaire, photographs were analyzed, and field interviews were conducted. Investigators monitored aircraft flights and checked weather records. On the whole, the Project Blue Book team successfully weeded out UFO reports that were obvious hoaxes or those that could be attributed to natural phenomena. However, for those cases that remained unsolved, investigators had two choices: admit that they had failed to identify the object, or embrace any remotely feasible explanation. Project Blue Book was terminated in 1969. It concluded that little, if anything, has come from the study of UFOs, and that the least likely explanation of UFOs is the hypothesis of extraterrestrial visitations by intelligent beings. On the evening of October 25, 1973, a young Pennsylvania farmer, Stephen Pulaski, and at least 15 other witnesses saw a bright object hovering over a field near them. Stephen grabbed his rifle and went to investigate. It was then that he noticed something walking along by the fence. They were hairy and long-armed, with greenish-yellow eyes, and a smell like burning rubber was present. Stephen sensed that these creatures were not friendly and fired a tracer bullet over their heads. And when they kept on coming, he fired directly at one of them. The creatures then all disappeared into the woods, and the glowing object disappeared from the field instantaneously. UFO researchers as well as a state trooper were called in to investigate. When they arrived, the people there told them that Stephen had been growling like an animal and flailing his arms. His own dog ran toward him, and Stephen attacked the dog. Stephen then collapsed, and after a time began to come to his senses. The entire group commented on the nauseating, sulfur-like odor that was present.